Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Nehul Vyas. I'm a vice president here at AVAP. We're so appreciative of your attendance here today, and we're so absolutely appreciative of our partnership with CDO Magazine for giving AVAP an opportunity to provide you this context on digital transformation tips from the trenches. I wanted to take just a little bit of time to provide some context into AVAP. We're a management IT and consulting firm based in Columbus, Ohio. We've got a large breadth of skill and experience in all things from solution selection all the way through managed services. Our company is based off of two large divisions. One is all about Workday, where we do a lot of work as a Workday SI in the public sector and higher ed space. And then we have an advisory services practice, which we've got organizational transformation services, which is really management consulting for us, and data and analytics. We have a unique opportunity here to bring the best of our organizational transformation solution services and data analytics expertise in this very unique use case as we talk about change analytics. You can see a couple of the logos that we've represented for our clients. We are a national firm, and we've got a lot of national clients in our portfolio across the Workday and advisory services portfolio of catalogs. I've already introduced myself. Again, my name is Nehul Vyas. I'm a vice president here in our data and analytics practice. I'm joined by two solution architects and two colleagues of mine. Josh Kuhlman is from our organizational transformation solutions and services division. He's a solutions architect. He has a lot of expertise in the world of change management, change analytics, and how we position stakeholders to really embrace transformational solutions. Adam Throckmorton is from our data and analytics practice. He's a solutions architect for us, and he does a tremendous amount of work in all things data, from data curation, engineering, all the way through data visualization, as you'll see as a part of our demo here. You can see the agenda on the right. We are so, again, appreciative of your attendance here as we go through a little bit about ourselves, a little bit of topic setting and providing you a framework in what we're talking about here in the context of change impacts and readiness. And then we'll go into a case study, and then Josh and Adam will walk us through a demo with a wrap up and Q&A. If you all have Q&A at the end of this, certainly please use the chat. We're happy to address as many questions as we can at the time that we have here today. Let's talk a little bit about data and analytics in the context of transformations. And I think it's fair to say that over the past several years, we've seen this continued ramp in modern analytics initiatives, right? We understand that data is one of the most important currencies that an organization has, irrespective of the vertical or the industry that you're in. How do we use that data to not only drive insights for maybe operational reporting, financial reporting, HR reporting, but how do we use the data and insights that we can collect and formulate a capability that drives change analysis, change analytics, the ability to understand the human sentiment in context to large transformation initiatives that may be process-oriented and certainly technology-oriented. Our ability and our privilege in servicing our clients nationally has given us this lens of using data and using the context and the framework for change management and coupling them together to really drive an analytic solution that can be integrated into, say, an organization's PMO. When organizations are thinking about transformation planning, we understand the old adage of people, process, and technology. In our experience, I think all three of those tiers are mindfully addressed typically, but our ability to integrate those tiers together and really, again, understand the human side of change, understand how that change is going to be received, and really maybe even drive some additional solutioning opportunities for predictive analytics to really embrace and forecast what changes as part of transformations is imperative. And this entire topic is really centered around, again, building the best of change management and data analytics together to build a capability for organizations of all sizes. And again, it's industry and vertical agnostic. Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you here to give us a little bit more depth into what we're talking about for the use case.
Sounds great. Thanks, Nehul. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Like Nehul said, I'm Josh Kuhlman, part of our organizational transformation solutions practice. I'm going to spend a couple minutes just talking about change management before we dive into that intersection of how change management and data analytics can play together. So when we think about transformation initiatives and various projects and changes that happen within an organization, really how disruptive they are for the organization is rooted in how well we manage that change. And what this visual is kind of showing here is we're at a current state, and a lot of times people think, okay, we can just jump to that future state and, we're immediately gonna realize the benefits and be able to see, the outcomes that. But there's really that transition period, where we have to manage that. We have to get people and the organization as a whole to that future state. We need them to understand what they need to be doing differently. We need to support, their emotions and their reactions to the change, and really help them see the benefits, long term, so that way they can adopt it. And, we do see those benefits and, realize what we're trying to change. So that's all this is really saying, is we have to go through that kind of messy middle, per se. And what we want to talk about is how, right, data and analytics can help us navigate that, even better. And, one of the key roles that we're gonna kind of be talking about as we talk through the use case is, right, leaders, and providing them, data and visibility into, the change, so they can help us manage it. And really, leaders play kind of a dual role in managing change, right? They need to help us manage the technical side, right? That's around, the plans, the strategic priorities of the organization. What are some of those critical milestones we need to be going after, and the budget side of things. But they also play a very key role in the people side too, right? Helping connect the change that we're going through and our transformation to the broader company strategy, helping, identify and manage risks and remove barriers for, the individual. And also, helping us look at, how much capacity, right, people have to really be able to adopt the change, right? We understand that organizations need to continue to run the day-to-day business, right? And so you have to balance, how much change we're putting on an organization to kind of move to the future and continue to evolve as an organization, while also executing the current work, and achieving, right, whatever we need to as an organization in the moment. So with that, right, leveraging data to help us manage that better, is really what we want to spend, today talking about, right? Tools are evolving, right? Organizations are continuing to, have more data at their fingertips, and, being able to leverage that to manage change, helps us, do better. We like to say, you can't manage what you don't measure. So, this is really gonna help us set a framework and start to ask questions, of where we can be leveraging data. With that, right, it starts to add that measurable value to change, right? A lot of times people, think that the people side of, transformations or change management can be a little soft and, squishy, right, and very, emotion focused. But this helps really put a, hard measurable, KPIs and metrics around how we're measuring change, and gives us something to be able to manage, towards. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the, data sources that we can be leveraging to manage change, and I'll let Adam kind of talk about how that can be curated. So, you can see on the, left side of the screen here, the various data sources that we can be pulling from, and this is really just, kind of the start, and, some examples, right? There's many others out there. Your change management teams that might be staffed on some of these projects are likely doing things like stakeholder and complexity assessments. These are typically done in Excel, right? There's other tools like Change Plan and other platforms that are used to kind of capture all, that data. And that's really focused on understanding some, like, the current state, around people and the various, people that a project is gonna touch. And then, how complex are we really asking them to, when we think about the future state, kind of move towards. You also have your ERPs, right? There's gonna be different data that you can pull from there, whether that's about, right, the current state and maybe some of the processes or, usage, or maybe you're implementing an ERP, right? And that's something that we can be pulling from when we think about adoption as well. You also have, like, your project management tools, right? That can be Microsoft Project, maybe, your organization uses tools like ServiceNow or Jira. That creates a lot of data around the project itself, right? How does it rank in terms of priority across the organization? What are some of the key deadlines and milestones that we can be pulling in to, harvest and visualize? Your project teams are likely conducting some kind of surveys, right? So there's, various tools, a couple examples on the screen there with Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, but that's just the beginning, right? And then you also have likely historical, right, survey data when you think about your organization's surveys that likely your HR teams and whatnot are, conducting on an annual basis, right? Those are data points that we can be harvesting and looking at, to help us inform our decision making as well. And then also, right, your people data within your HR systems, or there's, the very detailed data around each individual and maybe their tenure, right? Where they sit within the organization, helping us paint a picture of some of those items, but you also have performance management data, right? Who are gonna be some of our champions maybe, right? These are people that have been with the company, right? They show a hunger and a want to be involved within the organization based on past performance metrics, right? Those are maybe people we want to tap as change champions. So how do we harvest that data, help us make some decisions? So that's just painting the picture, right, of some of those different places that we can be pulling from, and we'll talk about kind of then where we go from there. But Adam, you want to talk a little bit about, right, how we pull that all together?
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. I'm Adam Throckmorton, one of our data architects here. So whenever we're talking about using existing data, we want to take the data that you have and make that something that you can see and use. So what Josh was referencing before, where a lot of this change management data seems kind of, squishy data, we can't really visualize it. And instead we want to take that squishiness and put it into something that's a little bit more foundational and that we can use. And that's leveraging kind of what we have. So using our stakeholder assessments, using those ERPs, taking all that different data that's coming in from the surveys, from your project management tools, and putting them all in one place. And then we do that using ETL tools. So ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So instead of having to take this and copy one Excel sheet over to another and having to do that time and time again, which will waste a lot of time over the course of the entire project, we can utilize ETL tools to do that automatically. Implementing data governance so that whenever we send out a survey, if we say that one is the best on one survey and that one is the worst on another survey, that's really going to give us some mixed results as far as data is concerned. So we want to make sure that we're using data governance with what we have and implementing that, so that way a one means a one, and that means good if we're sending out a survey, as well as stakeholder information. So we don't want to go into our stakeholder assessment and then go over into Workday to find who's this stakeholder's leader, who's their manager, how do we contact them? So we have to go back to our stakeholder assessment, back into our Workday tree to see who their leader is, and then back over to the stakeholder assessment to implement or to type in that email. But rather we can start to take all these tools and put them into one place. So we can take our stakeholder assessment, we can pull that Workday down, we can have it readily available. So that way, anytime that we're looking at a stakeholder assessment, we want to see who their leader is. So that way we can streamline certain processes. We don't have to go back and forth. It's all in one place. Testing and pulling results as well. Pulling those into certain visuals that we can say, okay, well, we have this project coming along for certain stakeholder groups, and this stakeholder group is they're feeling really ready for this change. So I feel great, we're going to push forward with this change. Or maybe they're not feeling so great, and then that means that we have to bring in more training, and that we have to start gearing up a little bit more for this change because our stakeholders aren't feeling that ready. Using that testing and pulling data is going to allow us to identify those key areas that we need to zone in on. So just kind of taking all of that and putting it into one place, and that's really how we want to leverage the data to push this change management forward into something that's greater than using all these tools individually.
Thanks, Adam. And I see a couple questions, so I'm just gonna pause before we move to kind of the next slide, right? In case we haven't already answered this, right? What do we mean by change management? When we're talking about change management here today, we're really focused on, right, the people side of an organization and our projects and transformation initiatives, and helping those people ultimately move to that future state. And so, right, there's various levers that we can pull. Traditionally that's your communications, your training, but right, that's also your engagement throughout the whole life cycle of the project. How are we making sure that we're informing our decision making through the lens of our people, right? And so that's pulling in SMEs, things like that. And then ultimately, as we're making decisions, right, feeding that back out into the organization. So leveraging, you might hear like change networks or change agents, right? So the change management team would typically work to identify those individuals and bring them along to help drive change throughout the organization. So really the people side of our projects and helping the organization move to that future state is what we're focused on here. And I think the other question we're going to kind of touch on a little bit more here on the next section, so. All right, so in terms of some of the business questions, right, that we might look to answer with change analytics. So these are, a few, and then we're gonna dive into a use case specifically to help us walk through the demo. Nehul mentioned earlier around, PMOs and change portfolios. So organizations want to understand, right, how much are we asking of our people, right? How many different initiatives are we trying to implement at once? And you might hear this, referred to as change fatigue. That's gonna vary by individual and department and things, but that is something that we can start to measure and understand. Okay, we're asking, this portion of the organization to do, 16 different things on top of their day job. Maybe that's something we need to reevaluate. Right, then we can also be as part of a change portfolio, understanding how different organizations are reacting to change, right? What are their sentiment and how are they feeling in terms of transformation and change within the organization? So maybe that's pulling, in survey information like we were talking about. We're also trying to answer questions around stakeholders. So what are some of the motivators, right? How do we understand where and part of an organization might be resistant to change? What are some of the potential barriers that we need to be thinking about and working, towards to remove when we think about people within the organization to ultimately be able to adopt change. So, right, that can be maybe the barriers they don't have, right, the tools they need to adopt it. Maybe it's more of a emotional barrier and, right, there's just too much going on and they haven't had time to really sit down and think. But there's also, and we'll talk about when we get into the demo, right, barriers around, maybe we haven't provided enough, right, training or knowledge for them to also really understand. And so how do we use data points to kind of measure that and track that they are fully ready to adopt change? And so that kind of, goes into that bucket in the bottom there, right, around change readiness. Are we setting clear metrics up front on our project journey to say these are the things that we need to hit to ultimately go live? And, including those kind of decisions and data points in our, go, no go decisions as we get ready to implement, something within an organization. So those are a few, and I think to kind of highlight that, we're gonna dive into a kind of use case here.
And as Josh, you're going through the presentation here, I think, the adage that, and the acronym that I think a lot of us in the IT space are familiar with is TCO models, right? Total cost of ownership models. When we think about planning efforts, when we think about large transformations, specifically on the system side, we have this rigor due diligence to think forward. What is this going to look like in 3, 5, 7 years in the context of maybe infrastructure, networking costs, right? Elements that come with the system. I think this concept of change analytics can integrate within that mindset of TCO. When we think about not just the technical systems and the applications that are coming, but really, again, as Josh mentioned very well, the human side of it and understanding that wealth of data points that come from stakeholder surveys, performance data, succession planning data, talent management data, and how do we couple that? So again, the adage of people, process, and technology is in lockstep as we're thinking about the overall kind of advanced TCO model and putting really effort into materializing what is in concept planning and driving strong transformation forward.
Yeah. All right, so to highlight, right, I think all of this that we've been talking about, it's probably beneficial to, use a little bit of a use case and scenario here, and then we'll, walk through a demo that kind of ties to this. So we mentioned, right, leaders earlier, and here, right, we have company ABC is planning to go under various transformation projects. So one might be a new ERP system, one might be a new, right, training methodology, one might be an organizational structure change, right, various projects undergoing here. And they touch all different parts of the organization, and so we want to understand those stakeholders, right, that are touched. We also need to balance, right, how much change is happening at once. We can't have all these going live on December 1st. Right, that's just too much for people to kind of work towards. So senior leaders want to understand who are the various initiatives, right, impacting within the organization. Where are we going to maybe run into some of those issues with too much change going on? and be able to visually see that so they can have strategic conversations about how they manage some of this. Right, some of the challenges tie to some of the things that we've talked about already, right? There's no single point of truth when we think about project-related information, right? It's captured within some Excel sheets, it's captured within your project management tools, et cetera. And right, some of those other data sources, like we've been talking about, are spread across multiple sources as well. And so, like Adam was talking about, we have to harvest that and pull it in through various methods to make it usable. And so ultimately, this tool, we want to be able to show that change saturation. We want to show sentiment of the organization towards these projects, and then some of that readiness. And so I'm going to stop sharing and let Adam kind of pull up a demo so you can see what this really looks like, and I'll talk through how we would use this to drive some decision making.
Yeah, so Josh, go ahead and let me know when you can see my screen here.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great. So right now we are looking at a change analysis that has been built within Tableau, pulling in various data sources. So when we're looking at change saturation, that could be potentially coming from Jira or another project management tool. Same with schedule burden, that could be coming in from a stakeholder assessment. When we're looking at change readiness, these could be coming in from training completion scores or a survey that we sent out, asking people, how ready do you feel for this change? We could have gotten the sentiment from another survey that we sent out where it says, how are you feeling about this change? We can look at change adoption, where we're actually looking at, let's say we're implementing a new application and we want to see how many people are logging in. So we're looking at login tracker, if workers and leaders are logging into the application and when they're logging in. So we're trying to utilize all of this data from these different sources and pull them all into one dashboard. So that way we don't have to go to our survey to see those results and then back over to Jira. We can have everything that we need all in one spot. So starting from the top and moving down with our change saturation, this allows us to highlight what is happening when and who it's happening to. So in January, we're looking great and all of our change saturation bubbles are showing as green. So we don't have a lot of changes that are coming down the pipeline. But when we go into February, we can see that operations is being hit with 8 different changes at one time. So we're really going to have to start to gear up looking at operations when it comes to February, because they're going to be going through a lot when it comes time to implement. And then we can even hover over these and we can implement pretty much whatever can be hovered over here. We can look in the leader in charge. So George Change is in charge of operations. So we need to make sure to reach out to him. Hovering over something else, we have Sarah Happens that's in charge of app development. So we can reach out to her if there's anything that's coming down the pipeline for app development. Looking over to schedule burden, we can kind of see which changes or which projects are happening to who. And if that's a high impact area. So again, in February, we can see that the Leader System 2.0 project that's coming down the pipeline for leaders, that's going to hit them really hard, but then they're going to drop off in April. So we need to pay a lot of attention to those leaders in February. And we can also see that just the number of changes over here on the right that are coming down for both leaders, workers, and then both of them combined. So it looks like leaders have a lot more changes coming in February. So we need to make sure to be equipping our leaders with the right tools that they need to succeed, so that they can really be our champions when it comes time to implement this change, so the workers can look toward them and say, yeah, I can do this as well. Go ahead.
No, it was right. So when we think about change saturation versus schedule burden, right, that change saturation, your point is really looking at, okay, how many changes? When we say that, right, it's likely how many different projects are being thrown at a specific area. And like Adam was saying, kind of tying to some of our conversation earlier, leaders are really important in managing change. And so, I love that little feature that you've built in there around, okay, I can immediately see George Change as that sponsor for operations that I probably as a, change management professional need to sit down and have some conversation with them, right? Understand, is his organization, how are they managing through this, or what support do they need? Right, and then, right, based on some of that feedback, we can be having further conversation with the leader when we look at that schedule burden. Maybe George has really, shared that his team is overwhelmed, they aren't able to meet, right, production capacity because we're throwing so much other stuff at them. And maybe we need to start looking at that schedule burden then and saying, okay, well, what are all the activities we're, putting at them? We've scheduled, right, training for 4 days in February. We're also pulling them out, right, for various communications and meetings and things. We have, 20 different SMEs from his team that have been, engaged in designing the solution. So we can start to maybe say, okay, do we need to spread this out? Do we need to delay the go live a little bit so we aren't pulling them away from their day job so much, and right, moving some of that out into March and April, right? Maybe that isn't possible, and this is a critical go live, right? Maybe it's tied to some other strategic priorities. So then you start to have further conversation, right, about how we can be managing this differently. Do we really, need to be doing all of this all at once? Can we be bundling, right, some of those trainings with other activities that are going on? It just allows us to really look at it in a way and ask those types of questions, right, with leaders.
I would also even promote, if you want to go through further ideation, it's not reflected in this dashboard, but if we think about schedule burden coupled with change saturation, and again, it's predicated on a leader, a person, right? We can also theorize and ideate on quality metrics. If we are saturating a leader that is a leader in a space that is, again, Josh mentioned production disruption, right? There is revenue components, there is quality components, there is the business of the business components that come with saturation. Us having the foresight to predict that, to understand that, and mitigate that helps the business overall, right? And all of these other work processes that are really on the critical path for the mission and the intent of an organization. So that's another ideation that can be expanded upon when we start thinking about these types of views. And again, that's why we want to make sure that we can provide this construct up through an entity like a PMO that is holistically looking at enterprise transformation, and potential consequences and benefits that come with such planning efforts.
Yeah, right. Nehul, I think you hit on the point of like, this is like, can be so iterative, right? You start, you could start even with just one of these, to help you start looking at this and making a decision and pulling in just a couple data sources, and grow from there, right? It doesn't have to be all at once. You don't have to be measuring all this right out of the gate. I think it's identifying some of those key metrics you want to track on your journey and, continue to grow. And once you kind of have that foundation, right? Like Adam was talking about, okay, you've set up some kind of data lake or right, place that you're pulling all of this into. It serves as a foundation and platform to only be able to scale from there, at a much smaller cost or impact to the organization.
Yeah, and one of the comments or questions that was in the chat was in the context of the number of data feeds or data sources that would make up such a representative dashboard, right? And I think that is also part of the iterative journey. I think what's important to understand is the nature of quick wins and how do we build the foundational layer with these quick wins, data sets that are easily available. That's why we had that one slide representing some of these ecospheres of readily available data that we found in our experience. Multiple organizations have it. Again, it's irrespective of size. You could be a Fortune 1000 organization or a startup, but ultimately there's a wealth and bounty of data that is probably laced in systems, laced in applications, laced in folders that if we take time to understand the value of it, ideate on the ability to marry that data, it may be able to then it may be then be able to mindfully curate that data in iterative ways as we're also looking at implementing such dashboards in iterative ways, right? It's ideation and it's maturation across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then another comment onto that data portion, starting as Nehul referenced with those quick wins with bringing in the easy data set first and then kind of building upon that. So we can bring in one data set for change saturation, and that may also give us what we need for schedule burden. And then we can also bring in survey data, and we can bring in additional app login data. So we can have multiple data sources running into one dashboard. And really the options are limitless. Our job is to make sure that things are running smoothly and that they're running quickly. So when it comes to the number of data sources that are feeding into this dashboard, we want to make sure that that's running at an optimal level, so that is coming in as quickly as it can. And it's not bogging down this dashboard so that whenever you come in to log into this, that you're not staring at a loading screen waiting for your metrics to populate, that whenever you select something, that it comes up just right whenever you click it.
Well, the other thing too, Adam, and I want to just hit upon again, the scalability of this and why we consider this something that is for small organizations, medium and large size. If we are a large or medium-sized organization, let's also acknowledge the nature of departmental or federation in the enterprise, right? There's finance, there's HR, there's supply chain, you name the business department, they typically have a little bit of their own autonomy. And the value of such a dashboard is that it can be represented and scaled from an enterprise view, but also a departmental view, right? The data can lend itself to having that granular lens. So maybe a finance leader, the office of the CFO, the CHRO, as she or he is going through transformation in their own respective department, they have a similar capability to understand their line level leaders, supervisors, managers that are critical in everyday operational support and execution. And then looking at things as change saturation, right? Schedule burden, things again that are more granular and focused in the business of the business, specific to an entity or a part of an organization.
Yeah. And I guess just, touching on a couple of the other views here, right? We were talking about change readiness earlier. And so mentioned training data, some of the views there, kind of visualizing that. So, a couple of insights that you might have. One is, okay, we set a kind of training completion, goal of X. And, you can see on that far view, okay, training completions, were kind of great right out of the bat in November. But maybe we aren't going live until middle of December. And so we have, most of them were completed kind of up front, and only a few others kind of as we went on in November. So do we need to do some kind of refresher right before go live when we think about kind of, knowledge loss? And we think about training scores, right? Maybe we wanted to see an average of 80% kind of test pass rates. And so when we think about, this visual in the middle, we actually kind of see a good chunk rate weren't kind of there. And so do we need to follow up with those users and reinforce some of the concepts on the questions, right, that they missed? Those are kind of more tactical things that we can be pulling levers on and making sure that we're, really making sure people are ready for this change.
I will also tell you in the context of change management and the wealth of data and analytics, the context of this dashboard is candidly internal looking, right? Personnel within an organization. But let's also acknowledge that there are a lot of organizations and companies out there that are making product that have to understand the change components of their consumers, folks that they're selling to, right? When we think about the nature of product management even, and coupling it with change analysis and understanding the evolution of, we're gonna iterate on a product and we're gonna have a release date to get that product, whatever it may be, out to our customers, our consumers. There's change management and foresight that comes with that, right? And it's coupled within the data, survey data of what consumers are looking for, right? Maybe even supplier data. Again, the fundamental change of this is not just internal. It's part of the entire ecosphere of an organization's topography.
Yeah, that's a great call out as well. And if you're focusing, whether it is creating a product or training up certain customers, we can always add in more detail as to whatever we're looking at. So when it comes to training up workers and making sure that they're ready for a change, we can see this worker ID as well as what score that they achieved for whatever that training was. So when it comes to, okay, who do we contact to see who we need to upskill a little bit more? What customer might we need to reach out to because they gave us a bad review? This is an easy way to merge both of those roles of we have our employee data or our customer data as well as we have our survey data. So it's taking those two and putting them together. And then we can also create other views of this to go a little bit more granular so that all you have to do is click an export button and then you have a view that shows customer or employee, their email, their leader, and then the report that they gave. So it's a really easy way to create those custom reports. As far as drilling down, we're going to drill down a little bit more into schedule burden. So if we click here, this will blow up a view that will allow us to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what exactly is happening behind the scenes. So switching back over to our example of change management or implementing a process, we can see what project is happening, who it's happening to, the level of impact that happens to, and then the change that is bringing in. So we know that the CEO visit is going to take 10 hours total, happening to leaders in February. So we really need to be focusing in on those high levels of impact to make sure that people are feeling ready for it and that they're not feeling overburdened if we're pulling them out of their day-to-day job. And let's say that we don't want to look at those high impacts at all. So we can filter to take out those high impacts and those medium impacts. So we can see the low level impacts that are really easy wins that we don't have to focus too much on, but we still have to be wary about because those quickly add up whenever we're looking at a lot of little change impacts coming down the line. But this just gives us a little bit more of a detailed view that comes in. And something else that we really want to stress is that this is built in Tableau and the data that we have is coming from one source, but just know that this is technology agnostic. This can be done in Tableau, this can be done in Power BI, this can be done in ClickView. Regardless of the data visualization tool, there's still an opportunity for us to bring in that data and for us to visualize it, because not everything has to happen in Tableau. If you don't like Tableau, then that's fantastic, we can use Power BI. But it's really whatever the need is that is defined, then the opportunities are limitless for us to bring in that data, visualize it, and then start using that visualized data as an action point to go forward and to springboard us into what's next.
Yeah, and I think that's a great kind of segue to, this next, couple slides to close us out, so I can, pull that back up. So like Adam was saying, right, these are totally, technology agnostic, right? The demo today was, meant to be just that, right? A demo tied to that use case that we showed. But we know, right, each organization's kind of maturity in their data analytics approaches vary, right? The tools that they use vary. And so that's not meant to be like a product, right? It's more meant to highlight, wow, there are a variety of ways that we can be pulling data sources together to really help us manage change, regardless of what that change is within our organizations. And so, with that, a couple quick wins for, you to maybe think about within your own organizations. One is, start by identifying what are some of those success metrics for your projects and transformation efforts. What are those, KPIs we could be measuring that we would like to see, and work backwards from there, right? What are the data sources that we have available to us that we can be pulling from to help us measure and track those? For example, right, we've talked a little about, stakeholders. Maybe we want to better understand our impacted audiences and, right, how big they are. Right, pulling your HR data, right? You likely have all of that sitting out there and can easily create some visualizations to show that, right? We were talking about kind of change saturation and being able to understand how much are we, asking of people throughout time, and, quickly pulling project go lives out of your project management tool and mapping that on a view for leaders can be, right, it seems so simple, but right, that's helpful to start some dialogue and be able to drive decision making and conversation. But like we were saying, right, this all, is a journey and kind of helps start that process of leveraging data within an organization in a variety of ways, right? Supports that maturity as you grow, and also, builds more community around your data, right? Each organization's experience differs, but can really help support more data-driven decision making.
Well, I think that last point too, right? We think about a technical capability again in the construct of a change analytics function, a dashboard, whatever we want to call the asset. But ultimately, it's really encouraging, again, ideation across various parts of an organization. And in our experience, that's how momentum builds, that's how community building builds, that's how peer-to-peer support builds. And that's how data culture starts materializing and evolving, right? We talk about the things of data-driven, data-informed, data strategy. These are all concepts of value, but when we have something tangible that we can sink our teeth into and get people involved to understand the value of their respective data, and in unison, enterprise data to make mindful, transformative decisions, in our experience, data culture, data maturity really organically evolves. And quite frankly, the more reps, the more iterations, the more quick wins that are injected into the business, the acceleration of that data culture becomes very, very evident.
Anything you'd add, Adam?
No, I think that's a fantastic call out.
I think with that, we're gonna, open up here for questions in a minute and talk through that, but, would say, reach out, let us know how we can help. We're happy to kind of have more conversation, more pointed at your organizations and kind of work through some of those challenges with you. Right, a couple of examples here, right? We can come in and quickly understand, right, some of the change management needs and, where there are opportunities to be able to leverage visualizations, right, doing some of those visualization quick starts, so leveraging, right, some of the easily accessible data sources there and starting to highlight that value that this can add for the organization. And also, right, if you want to manage this more internally, we can help, right, host some sessions and workshops for your teams to educate them on how to be doing more of this and then letting you guys own it more long term. So just a few different ways that we can be supporting, right? And like, we've been talking about this, is totally solution agnostic, and really meant to be more of a customized need for each organization and meeting them where they're at. So
I think that solution agnostic piece, again, I want to hit on that a little bit because we're talking about various scale and size and quite frankly, data maturity and data capability maturity in organizations. Candidly, this can be supported through hands-on keyboard SQL to engineer and curate the data and propagate it again through Tableau, Power BI, Click, you name the visualization tool. But I think the crux is really taking potentially 2 uncomfortable steps forward to really challenge yourself in the value of this framework, the value of change analytics, to really save yourself 10 horrible steps in the future because we haven't thought through the integrated mindset of people, process, and technology, and leveraging as many of the data assets that are organically produced in an organization to couple those together and drive, again, more proactive, forecasted, transformative initiatives. I stress that again, because in our experience, we are working with very large global firms and very small firms, right? But the construct, the framework, and the approach is very, very resonant across each tier of an organization size.
Great.
With that said, I do want to make sure that we can answer any questions that are out there. Josh, I know that there's one in the QA here related to the types of business questions we're trying to answer with the data sources. I know that we've talked a couple of specific use cases, things that are more grandiose in nature, but are there certain quick hitters? I mean, even if we think about your expertise in change analytics, specific KPIs that may be mindful, right, for us to think about and potentially advise folks that are on this call to get started with.
Yeah. I think we've touched on a couple around, right, like when we think about in the bucket of change readiness. So specifically, I think, how ready are we for that change could lead to, okay, well, how many people have completed training, right? How many individuals have participated in, right, the workshops that we're doing to get people ready, right? Like you can start to tie some numbers to that, thinking, right, beyond, okay, we've gone live, it was on, some of the dashboard, but we didn't really talk about it. Right, change management doesn't end once we go live. In a lot of ways, it's really just the beginning. Right, so you start to measure adoption, right? And those are where, some really great KPIs can come, especially now as we implement, right, various digital tools. We can say, okay, we want to see, 90% of people log into the new system within the first 30 days. Right, you can start to put metrics like that out there and then track against that. And then when you aren't seeing, right, that metric hit, you can start to dig into, okay, well, is there a part of the organization, right, that hasn't started to use the tool and, start to ask why and do some follow-up work there. Or right, if you're hitting those metrics, then it's a great story to tell, right, for the organization and continue to get people excited about these changes. So those are just a couple, additional examples out there.
That's awesome. And Adam, I want to defer to you on this one from a data solution architect lens. Again, we talked about solution agnostic, especially on the visualization side. But I think in our experience, it's still the rigor of best practice design elements, right? How do we make these dashboards, again, whether it's Click, Power BI, Tableau, you name it, how do we make them actually mindfully interactive for an end user, right? And help us kind of think through, I guess, from your experience architecting said dashboards across the board, not just on change analytics, but some maybe design tips that you look at as a part of the UX experience, the end user experience, and how we can bring these KPIs and metrics to light and actually have them be insightful for action.
Yeah, I think that the best thing that we can do is start with the end goal in mind. So we're trying to answer a question, so if we're building a visualization around that question, we want to make sure that we can answer that with the visualization. So for example, it's saying with training, let's say, who are the people that are not trained up? So we can build a visualization to show those people that haven't completed their training. And then the crucial part about that information is then the so what. The so what is the additional question that we're trying to answer with those visualizations and that we're trying to bring in with the UX design. So we can bring in a visual that says, here are the list of 5 people that have not completed the training. So what? So what's the next step of that design process that we can build into the dashboard that we can achieve? So we haven't completed we haven't completed training. So what are our next steps? We need to follow up with them. We need to identify what barriers are not allowing them to take that training. Are they too busy? Are there other changes going on? Is it a change saturation problem that we're having? And then all of those questions that we have, we want to make that data and all of that stuff readily available and easily accessible for anyone that's accessing that viz. So that could look like we have a list of people who aren't trained up. We have the departments that they're in. And then in addition to that, we have next to that, what kind of change saturation that department is undergoing. So if we can see that it's a light change saturation, maybe that's indicated by a green bubble next to their name and their department, and then we can have who's not being trained. We can say, well, they don't have a lot going on right now, so we probably need to give the leader a nudge and say, hey, let's get our workers trained up in the right amount of time. So taking the end goal in mind and then also answering that so what in that, I think that's the best practice to achieve.
I love it. And I think the other part too, again, we think about the investment in this and the yield from that investment. This takes time, this takes effort, this takes people power. But I will also tell you, when we challenge ourselves to one, look at individual data sets, but then think holistically of how we marry and couple these data sets, here's what happens, right? Organizations that don't necessarily have data maturity start thinking about very tactical things like data dictionaries, right? When we think about a dashboard, what we want to do is make sure that there's no ambiguity in the terminology, the definition of a metric, and certainly the definition of any metrics that are coming together to transform into KPIs. We want to be crystal clear so the end user understands what exactly they're looking at and how they're interpreting it, right? It takes consensus. It takes people coming together, again, in building a tactical data dictionary. So we're speaking the same language. We understand what these terminologies mean. And again, the end user experience is far more rich because there's no ambiguity in the interpretation of the data. And again, it's our experience that as we cultivate these types of vizzes, these types of data assets, that's a natural organic thing that happens. And again, it just injects a little bit more maturity into an organization. And it gets people a little bit more fluent and articulate on the data that they're working with, right? It's the stewardship of that data that comes together in the community build aspect as well.
Yeah. Adam, I'll pose a question to you, right? This isn't just pie in the sky or philosophy. Adam has worked with a variety of clients, right, to help build this out. We've worked with, some other ones from our side in the healthcare space, but I think Adam's currently working with a utility client to do some of this. I guess, what do you see as some like the biggest challenges that you have to overcome right out of the gate in order to kind of get to the future state type visualization that we're showing here?
I think the biggest challenge right out of the gate is making sure that everyone's on the same page. And that takes a lot of leadership direction of saying, this is what we're going to be doing. This is the tool that we're going to be using. Because I think that it's really easy to get caught up in all the different avenues that everyone is trying to go into. So if we have 5 different change leads using 5 different change management workbooks and they have 5 different change management assessments, then we have 5 definitions of what is true. So I think that really getting all on the same page and making sure that everyone is able to work collaboratively together. And that way we have one source of truth and we have one source of making sure that, we're all logging our changes into the same place. And then going from there, we can see the benefits of that in the rest of our data processes. So when we're building our dashboards, when we're getting our data sources, we have everything already in one place. So that way we don't have to go to 5 different data sources. We've already done the work in the first place, right out of the gate, of getting everyone on the same page to work together into one document. So that way we can take that and then just go forward and get the best results.
Yeah, that's
Great.
awesome. That's great. Any other perspective, Josh or Adam, that we can lend to our folks here before we wrap up?
No, I think this has been a great discussion, and, appreciate some of the comments and questions in the chat. Right, would just reiterate, if you have, other thoughts or questions, we're here to, continue the conversation, so reach out. For, those of you who may want to share this with others, I think the recording will be ready within, 2 business days or so, and that will be sent out. So we'd just say, thank you for your time and joining us today,
And big thank you to CDO Magazine for allowing us the platform here. And again, it's not one size fits all, but I will tell you, in our experience in seeing a lot of national clients go through transformation change, we are a big believer in this, and it can be scaled. We're happy to help provide any guidance for you all to get started. And again, we are just so appreciative of your time and questions. Thank you so much, team. Hope everyone has a great day.
thank you.
Thank you.